Tuesday, and we are back here discussing questions arising from You Are the Universe, Discovering Your Cosmic Self and Why It Matters. The website is right here. Please engage in this conversation with us. And the website, once again, is discoveringyourcosmicself.com. And I'm just getting the book. So, sorry for that interruption. So, I was just getting the book from the desk. The book is You Are the Universe, Discovering Your Cosmic Self and Why It Matters. So, today's question is by Psyche Delicacy, and she has a long question which I'm not going to read right now, but basically she says, can we be sure that we are not alone, that there's only one of us? Or how can we be sure of other people's minds? She seems like she's wanting to not be alone, and therefore does not like the idea that I am the universe, you are the universe. So first of all, this kind of thinking has long history in philosophy. It's called solipsism. And so let me just read to you what solipsism means in philosophical terms. Solipsism is the philosophical idea that only one's own mind is sure to exist. As an epistemological position, solipsism holds that knowledge of anything outside one's own mind is unsure. The external world and other minds cannot be known and might not exist outside the mind. As a metaphysical position, solipsism goes further to the conclusion that the world and other minds do not exist. So this is the problem we all face when we get lost in philosophical conundrums and try to understand things in theory and not through experience. Let me try and explain what I mean. I personally don't like these words, solipsism. They're used in a denigrating term, and also the original intent of the philosopher is frequently lost, because the philosopher may have not been coming from an intellectual position but an experiential position. So let me ask you just something very, very simple. Is it possible for you to know anything or infer anything that is outside your consciousness? I think if you think about it, it's obvious. If there's a universe that exists outside consciousness or awareness, then it's not accessible to us. We cannot infer it even, because our imagination is based on our experiences in consciousness. So number one, if there is a universe outside of awareness or consciousness, it's unknowable. Number two, when we say our consciousness, what do we mean? Because, we think there's somebody inside this body-mind that is looking out at the world. But as I've said before, there's no one inside this body-mind. This body-mind and the world are a unified activity in our consciousness. So then the next question is this consciousness personal or impersonal? Well, it is simultaneously both. It is personal because it is conditioned by past experience. Greg Whalen says he's a charlatan. Thanks, Greg, for the compliment. Okay, so I'll keep going. So the next question is this consciousness personal or impersonal? And the answer is it's both. The personal consciousness is a result of conditioning, religious conditioning, economic conditioning, all kinds of conditioning, economic conditioning, historical conditioning, conditioning of our parents, centuries of conditioning. In fact, every thought is a result of centuries of conditioning and not our own. But it influences our perception of what we call the world, and therefore in every moment the world that we personally experience and how we personally interpret is a result of our conditioning. So right now look around you, and everything that you're experiencing personally and everything that you interpret as a result of that experience is a result of your conditioning. And it's just good to acknowledge that the world you see, every situation, every circumstance, every event, every person that you meet, every encounter is conditioned by your sense of the separate self. And that is also called karma. So karma influences every experience of the world, and also every interpretation of that experience, and also the choices we make as a result of that interpretation. This is the so-called soul's journey through cosmic time. But then if we go deep into our own awareness, we realize that it's part of the interbeingness, the matrix that we call our collective conditioning, and that even our personal conditioning is a result of that. And then as we go deeper and deeper into that, then we end up with pure consciousness, which is differentiating into multitudes or almost infinities of modes of consciousness, each with their own knower, their own process of knowing, and their own objects known, all within that one mind. We can call that God's mind, or we can call that the ultimate reality, or we can call that pure awareness, pure consciousness, all that is Ein Sof, Allah, God. Doesn't matter the word, but there's an ultimate ground of existence which is present as the deep now. And in that deep now, all is happening simultaneously. And there's no past, present, future, all is one. And that deep now is also probably what scientists mean when they use words like quantum entanglement, non-locality, non-local correlation, infinite being, whatever word you want to use. So is that desirable to have that experience? And I personally think that more and more people are having those experiences, which we call transcendence. In those experiences, there's richness of qualia experience. Sight, taste, smell, color, sound, texture, all become acutely refined and pleasurable and rich. In that deep now, there is loss of sense of separate self. In that deep now, there is effortless spontaneity. Life evolves joyously without hindrance and in the direction of truth, goodness, beauty, harmony, love, compassion, joy, equanimity. In that deep now is loss of the fear of death. And in that deep now, as the word implies, there is no time, timelessness. It's an experience that people thirst for, that people can have in meditation, or when they fall deeply in love, or when they have a peak experience in nature, sometimes controlled experiences through hallucinogenics, or even what is these days called microdosing, and sometimes through biofeedback and technology, sometimes through whirling dancing, sometimes through a deep sexual experience with deep love combined, and sometimes through whirling and dancing and chanting and mantras. So for thousands of years, people have experienced what we call reality. And that reality is not loneliness, that reality is a solitude in which there is oneness of being. And so one can go back to that oneness of being and then show up in this world as the separate self, all the while recognizing that the separate self and the experiences of the separate self are all part of the dream, and that ultimately we want to wake up from the dream of the separate self and the world of the separate self has created. Today, as I do this podcast, my heart is filled with sadness at the tragedy that occurred in Manchester after Ariana Grande's concert. And I was thinking to myself that the history of humanity is the history of violence. Only today, with all the technologies we have, today with the capacities we have for destruction, that lack of evolution of the separate self and the dream world that we have created of violence is risking our own extinction. So I ask you, my friends, can you and I together, just you and I together, commit to total non-violence in our every thought, in our every word, in our every feeling, in our every speech, and in our every action? Can we do that? Perhaps if we do that, there is hope for humanity. Otherwise, we risk our extinction. Okay, thank you for joining me, and thank you for supporting the book, You Are the Universe, Discovering Your Cosmic Self and Why It Matters, and thank you for being on this forum. I end by saying, let us commit today to non-violence in every single aspect of our life. If we do that, then perhaps love will redeem the world. Thank you, and God bless.